The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected.
I think it's going to be very interesting. We're going to find out where everybody stands.
All eyes on the historic summit between Presidents Trump and Putin inside the high-stakes meeting to determine whether peace in Ukraine is possible.
The America First economic agenda is working.
Inflation numbers better than expected, the economic impact felt from tariffs and the effects hitting small businesses, and feeling the pressure from the Trump administration. Mexico extradites more than 24 top cartel leaders to the U.S. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for joining us. I'm Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week, and we look ahead at what to expect, starting with the 4 big stories we've been following this week. President Trump federalizes the National Guard in an effort to crack down on crime in Washington, D.C. DNI Tulsi Gabbard releasing more alleged evidence of collusion in the Russiagate scandal. The Trump administration celebrates a better-than-expected inflation report, and Texas Democrats return to the Capitol, ending their 2-week standoff. But first, Russian President Vladimir Putin says he and President Trump have reached a mutual understanding regarding the war in Ukraine. This as both presidents held a bilateral summit in Anchorage, Alaska, Friday, as the White House continues to push the Kremlin for peace in Ukraine. Both leaders meeting first on the red carpet of a military base, you can see there, marking Putin's first time on American soil in a decade. Before the historic summit, President Trump outlining the possible consequences Russia could face if the death and destruction in Ukraine continues.
You had said earlier this week that Putin would face severe consequences if you get the sense from him that he's not interested. What do you mean by that?
Economically severe, yes, it will be very severe. I'm not doing this for my health, okay? I don't need it. I'd like to focus on our country, but I'm doing this to save a lot of lives. Yeah, very severe.
The closed-door meeting between the two presidents and a handful of staffers lasted more than 2.5 hours. Afterwards, a news conference was held where both leaders gave remarks, with the tone being one of mutual admiration.
And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite got there, but we've made some headway.
As of Friday, no deal for a ceasefire has been made, though President Trump said he would call Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to personally update him on the discussions. Now to President Trump and that crucial meeting with Russian President Putin to map out the long-awaited ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. So the meeting in Alaska, Putin has not been in the U.S. in, what, a decade, correct?
Yeah, it's been 10 years since he stepped foot on U.S. soil. The last time he was here was in September of 2015. He went to the United Nations General Assembly in New York City, and he held talks with then President Barack Obama. Now, the meeting itself was said to be pretty tense, with the leaders clashing over issues like the conflict in eastern Ukraine and also Russia's military involvement in Syria. So even though it's been 10 years, I guess not much has changed.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. And speaking of Ukraine, President Zelensky, we should mention, says Putin doesn't really want peace. But some analysts are saying this visit marks an important shift in Putin's willingness to play ball when it comes to these peace negotiations.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, mixed opinions on how this is all going to play out in general, but Putin's visit to the U.S. really are almost never just casual diplomacy visits. There's almost always a concrete reason behind each meeting when he's showing up here. Now, his last big meeting with President Trump was in 2018 in Helsinki, Finland. The main purpose of that was really to discuss the U.S.-Russia relations that were strained by sanctions, also election interference allegations, and then conflicts in Syria and Ukraine.
All right, Emma, thank you. Yeah. Speaking of meetings, later on, Emma will be back to dive into President Trump's history of meeting with controversial world leaders who other presidents have avoided. Germany announces that it will supply a package of military aid to Ukraine worth up to $500 million thanks to a new NATO supply line. Earlier this year, NATO started sending regular deliveries of large weapons to Ukraine after the Netherlands said it would provide air defense equipment, ammunition, and other aid. Sweden, Denmark, and Norway then followed suit, providing a combined almost $800 million. Germany is focusing on critical critical air defense as Russia's ongoing airstrikes have killed more than 12,000 Ukrainian civilians. Britain, France, and Germany are threatening to reimpose sanctions against Iran if it doesn't restart negotiations over its nuclear program. Iran has an end-of-month deadline to resume talks. Britain, France, and Germany say they are committed to using all diplomatic tools to ensure Iran does not develop a nuclear weapon. This threat from Europe comes after the U.S. bombed key nuclear facilities in Iran back in June. A group of alleged high-ranking cartel members are now in U.S. custody. Mexican authorities extradited 26 prisoners to the U.S. earlier this week. The cartel members were wanted in the U.S. as some face drug trafficking charges. This is the latest transfer deal as the Trump administration puts pressure on criminal enterprises bringing drugs across the border. Mexican officials say these transfers ensure public safety and prevent continued operations from prison. Today's earlier this week, I should say, the inflation report shows tariffs so far have had a muted impact on consumer prices. The president's biggest tariffs just took effect last week, so economists predict it could take months to work through the economy. Our Atra El-Nashar has a closer look at this and how small businesses are adapting to the change.
For the fourth month in a row, July saw a slight rise in consumer inflation. The 12-month inflation rate coming in at 2.7%, slightly less than economists expected. Federal Reserve policymakers pay closer attention to a number known as core inflation, which takes out volatile food and energy prices. July's number came in at 3.1%.
Ignore the panicans and trust in President Trump. That is our motto here at the White House. The America First economic agenda is working.
The White House celebrating the inflation report, which was prepared by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, whose commissioner the president just fired, accusing her without evidence of tampering with data to make him look bad. The president also lashing out at Goldman Sachs over its new report, saying U.S. consumers only absorbed about 22% of tariff costs through June, but that's expected to rise to 67%. Trump claims tariffs have not caused inflation or any other problems for America. Others in his administration giving mixed messages about who pays the tariff, the importer or the exporter.
In the long run, I have every confidence that these tariffs will be borne, that the incidents will be borne by the countries that we're tariffing.
The check is written by the importer right at the dock.
Yeah, and then the importer can pass it on or not.
On Main Street, small business owners seeing conditions improve. The National Federation of Independent Business reporting a rise in their optimism index for July. They also report a rising sense of uncertainty as firms wait for trade policy to take shape. A major component of that policy was just delayed. Hours before a temporary trade truce was set to expire Monday night, the U.S. and China agreed to extend negotiations another 90 days. There's no shortage of issues between the world's two largest economies. The U.S. wants streamlined access to Chinese rare earth minerals, for China to do more to address fentanyl production and become more of a consumer economy, just to name a few. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
The White House says it believes the Federal Reserve has enough room now to cut interest rates by 50 basis points. Right now, it's not clear what the Federal Reserve will do next month. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell says prices are going up at a relatively slow pace. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is citing the recent downward revisions in the jobs report for wanting to go bigger on cuts.
Now we've seen two things. We've seen with these big economic revisions, and I'm sure we'll come back and talk about poor quality of data, because if we'd had the original numbers, Fed could have been cutting in June, July.
According to Bessent, had the Bureau of Labor Statistics' original numbers looked like the revisions, then there would have already been room for a rate reduction. Nearly 1/3 of U.S. adults say their financial situation has gotten worse in the past year. A Yahoo Finance Marist poll survey found 33% of respondents said their family's finances have deteriorated in the last year. 27% argue their situation has gotten better. 40% said their financial conditions stay the same. Among all age groups, older generations like Gen X and baby boomers were most likely to say that their finances have gotten worse. Coming up on the National News Desk, money talks, from new inflation data to tariff impacts. Economist Steve Moore breaks down this week's big money headlines. And UCLA claws back some of the funds frozen by the Trump administration as the White House clamps down on hate speech. And the pace of consumer inflation increased slightly in July, but not as much as some economists feared, as the national debt hit a new high, surpassing $37 trillion. Earlier this week, Jan Jeffcoat spoke with former Trump White House economic advisor Steve Moore.
Steve, good morning to you. Talk about some of these new numbers, the consumer price index and the national debt, which, as we know at this point, still on this unsustainable fiscal path.
Well, first of all, I mean, on the inflation front, Jan, there was a big national sigh of relief because the numbers were really good. You know, we're seeing inflation continue to tick down. People are still concerned about the price of groceries and the price of the utility bills and so on. But the price increases are nothing like what we saw under Biden. So we're looking at about a 2.5% inflation rate right now. That's a little higher than we want, Jan. We'd like it down to about 2%, but it's much better than we've had in the past 4 years. And that was a relief, too, because as you just said, a lot of people thought that the tariffs that Trump has imposed would filter into higher prices. Not a lot of signs of that yet. Now, I do think at some point, if you impose tariffs, some of that will be borne by the final consumer. But at least so far, we've got inflation in a safe zone.
And what about this massive debt we're looking at right now?
Well, everyone knows it's a cancer in our economy. We cannot continue to borrow $2 trillion a year. It is going to bankrupt the country if we continue on that path. I believe we have to grow the economy faster. You know, the good news is in the last couple of months that the deficit has come down a little bit. So we're making a little progress, but not nearly enough. We have to really grow the economy, and we have to get rid of the hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of waste in Washington.
Yep.
Trump has made some efforts at that, but we need to do a lot more.
Still a lot of work to be done. Another big headline this week, President Trump has nominated a top economist at the Heritage Foundation, E.J. Antoni, to lead the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Yes.
You know E.J. Tell us more about him and what we can expect.
Well, I've known E.J. for 4 or 5 years. He's worked with me. He's an excellent economist, very solid, good statistician. He's going to call the balls and strikes in a very fair and accurate way. And look, Jan, the most important, we talked about this in weeks past, but the most important statistic that we put out each month that gauges the health of the American economy is the jobs report. We need to make sure that jobs report is accurate. And I've been doing this for 35 years. The jobs numbers that have been coming out in the last couple of years, they're all over the place. They're up and down and up and down.
And then they're changed, and then they're corrected, and then there's major
Exactly.
corrections, like 1.5 million job correction during the Biden administration. We recall all that.
That's right. And then you have 2 surveys, one of establishments, of business establishments, and one of households.
Yeah.
And sometimes they point in opposite directions. And so we need accuracy. We can't have these massive revisions every month. I think EJ is the kind of guy who could come in. Look, he's not going to try to fudge the numbers. What he's trying to do is give us accurate numbers, which is good for the economy.
I want to ask you about another statistic that I saw yesterday. You know, for the first time, we're seeing this shift in the largest private sector labor union in America. I don't know if you saw the story with the Teamsters. Their political arm now says it's going to donate to battleground Republicans in the upcoming midterms, which is obviously a huge change from their support of Democrats, but maybe not so surprising when you consider this report showing less than 5%, I saw, of union workers actually voted for their current leadership. 5%?
Yeah, this is an amazing statistic, and it shows how undemocratic some of these big unions have become, where what happens is once they get in, you know, some of the leadership was voted in 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and they haven't had any elections since then, so that most of the workers, you know, 19 out of 20 of the workers never even voted for the leadership. So we need to add some democracy. They need to have, as I've recommended, every 2 or 3 years, the union should be required to have a vote of their members to see whether they want new leadership or whether they want to continue to be in the union, et cetera. So it's become a big problem. Now, it is amazing that you now have some of the unions giving money to and endorsing Republicans. I think that's part of the fact that there's a new world. And by the way, Trump has been pretty pro-union. His policies have been very good for blue-collar workers, and I think they appreciate that.
The Port of Los Angeles just experienced a record-setting month. Take a look at the numbers. Moving more than 1 million containers in July. That's an 8% rise from the previous July, and it topped the all-time high reached in May of 2021. Analysts say importers and retailers were in a rush to get cargo prior to August 7th, which was the deadline for when the Trump administration's reciprocal tariffs on many countries kicked in. A federal judge is ordering Trump administration officials to release $95 million in federal funds for the National Endowment for Democracy. The judge says the funds were withheld for impermissible policy reasons, which caused irreparable harm to the nonprofit. NED sued the administration in March for denying over $200 million in congressionally approved funding. DOJ cut the funding in February as Elon Musk worked to reduce government costs. New developments. A judge has ordered the Trump administration to restore some federal grant funding it suspended for the University of California, Los Angeles. Not clear yet how much money will be returned. The university says the government froze more than $580 million in funding. President Trump threatened to cut funds for universities over pro-Palestinian student protests against Israel's assault in Gaza. We're learning more about plans for President Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system. Reuters reporting the U.S. government presented the project to defense contractors in Alabama last week. It showed the system will include 4 layers for tracking and intercepting missiles, 1 satellite-based and 3 land-based. 11 short-range missile batteries will also be located across the U.S. The president has said the project is expected to cost $75 billion over 3 years. Coming up next, what business owners in D.C. think about President Trump's deployment of the National Guard. We'll be right back. Later, why officials in Utah say a large water tax increase for hundreds of thousands of frustrated residents was necessary. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America, and we start in Washington, D.C., where store owners impacted by juvenile crime are backing the president's crime crackdown.
Sajib and Tamika own the 24/7 Best Tobacco and Wireless at Heckinger Mall Shopping Center. The store sells a lot of food, too. Friday night, they say 20 to 30 juveniles came and did this.
And if a lot of kids are hungry, I have no problem with feeding nobody. You know what I'm saying? Kids, I would give it to them.
But they don't even think the juveniles ate much of what they took. Instead, they just trashed the place, as this video obtained by our news partner WTOP shows. We asked the couple what they think of President Trump's plan to federalize city police and deploy more officers and the National Guard.
I'm telling Trump, yeah, just send the boys to bend around because this is crazy. And then you see Dollar Tree closing, or CVS closed down, 7-Eleven closed down. We trying to put a store in your community, then you do this.
This is the CVS she mentioned that closed. At the next closest one on H Street, you can't even so much as buy a $2 bottle of soap without asking an employee to unlock the display case.
And the city keeps saying crime is down, but do you feel safe?
No, I don't think so. Crime is down. Crime is up.
In D.C., who told that lie?
Innocent lives were taken in broad daylight in a place where people should feel safe to run their everyday errands and to live their everyday lives.
32-year-old Ethan Neinecker showed up to the Target with a handgun he received from a family member, according to Austin police. Neinecker shot and killed an employee, Hector Martinez Machuca, while he was pushing shopping carts. Police say he then turned his attention to Adam Chow, who was sitting in his Toyota 4Runner with his wife and his 4-year-old granddaughter. Neinecker shot and killed Chow and then shot into the back seat where the child was sitting before beating Chow's wife. Austin police got a call of a naked man walking through someone's backyard in South Austin. Sergeant Nathan Sexton says when they found him,
he said that he was Jesus, and there was really no reason whatsoever given. It was a completely random choosing of the victims.
APD Chief Lisa Davis says all of this happened in less than 1 hour. Neinecker was tased after not listening to officers' commands. He's being charged with 2 counts of capital murder and 1 count of first-degree murder.
The pain calls will be felt by our community for years to come.
We're against just an arbitrary taking a hike in taxes. We would like to see those in charge look at where you can cut.
Stephen and Julie Kenyon are already on a fixed income, and this additional tax will be another hit to their wallet. Those in favor of the tax say it's because there is a lot of infrastructure that needs to be developed to handle the growing demands of the area. While Riverton City Council member Andy Perucci serves on the Jordan Valley Water Conservancy District and was the lone vote against the tax increase at their June meeting and voted against it again Monday night.
Before we as government go and ask them for more taxes, we need to do everything possible to cut costs, tighten our belts, and look at our own spending first. And I don't feel like we've done that enough yet.
They want to raise it 11%. That's a lot. And I'm sure they're not the only ones. Other utilities or other places want to raise theirs for the property tax, but where's it going to end?
Coming up next, a multi-million-dollar settlement in California. The retailer that was accused of profiting from false labeling. Plus, the airline voted most likely to ease the burden of vacationing with your family. We'll be right back. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now. Grammy Award winner Taylor Swift announces a new album. The record, titled The Life of a Showgirl, is slated to be released on October 3rd. Also, Nike co-founder Phil Knight and his wife Penny are donating $2 billion to the Oregon Health and Science University's Cancer Institute. It is regarded as the single largest donation ever to a U.S. university or health institution. And Venus Williams will return to the U.S. Open next week. The 45-year-old will be the oldest player to compete since 1981. Williams made her return to competitive tennis last month after more than a year away. Those stories and much more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. Walmart will pay over $5 million to settle a California consumer protection lawsuit. The retailer is accused of overcharging customers by selling items that weighed less than the label amount. That's according to the Santa Clara County District Attorney's Office. The civil complaint also said Walmart charged customers more than their posted or lowest advertised price. Amazon says its Prime members will soon be able to order milk and eggs at the same time as clothes, electronics, and other basic items and get it delivered that day. It's a direct challenge to Instacart and Walmart Plus, which do same-day grocery delivery. The new service will roll out to more than 2,300 U.S. cities by the end of the year. Air Advisor shared a list of the top U.S. airlines that make traveling easier for families. American Airlines coming in at number 1, followed by United and Delta. Hawaiian and Alaska Airlines round out the top 5 rankings based on several factors, including family seating policies, pre-boarding with young children, and child meal availability. Still to come, the DOJ takes on an international criminal, the Haitian gangster, now in the nation's top most wanted, and the hefty reward for his capture. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. Evidence of collusion? The latest document dropped from Washington, the allegations now casting a dark cloud over a previous administration.
They've been using drones now for a while, and they're using it to smuggle drugs every single day.
The border battle takes to the skies. How authorities and criminals are using drones to further their own agendas.
Is that there is a whole community that is suffering because of the violent crime in this district.
The National Guard now on the ground in Washington, D.C. The arrests already being made as city leaders discuss What's next? From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin with the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who has released emails she says show how top officials under President Obama demanded the intelligence community, quote, fall in line behind the Russia hoax. It's a charge those in the spotlight deny, as Christine Frizzau reports.
On the intelligence community's assessment of Russian involvement in the 2016 election, new declassified emails reveal a desire for unified support. A 2016 email just made public by the Director of National Intelligence reveals James Clapper writing, "It is essential that we be on the same page in the highest tradition of that's our story, and we're sticking to it." This despite concerns from then NSA Director Mike Rogers about a lack of access to the intelligence and a lack of time to review it, writing, "Given the expedited nature, his folks weren't, quote, fully comfortable to be absolutely confident in their assessments." Clapper responding, "We may have to compromise our normal modalities," adding, "More time is not negotiable." These emails, just the latest tranche of documents to be declassified as part of what White House officials have labeled the, quote, Russia hoax.
There was a whole scheme to try and demean Trump so that I couldn't win an election. And that is a criminal group of people. They're sick people, and they're criminals, and they should be taken care of.
Look, this is what we thought was going on all along. This is the deep state coordinating and colluding with the liberal media to create false narratives that would hurt President Trump and other Republicans.
The question, though, for some, if the actions by Obama intelligence officials were taken simply for national security reasons, as those involved in meetings at the time have denied politics were at play.
The assessment made no judgment about whether or not these Russian influence operations had any impact on the outcome of the election. We didn't go there at all. We also didn't include in the assessment any reference to collusion.
The just released emails may factor into grand jury deliberations reportedly underway by the Justice Department. I'm Christine Frizzau for the National News Desk.
The Pentagon is reportedly considering creating a so-called military reaction force solely to deploy into U.S. cities with protests or civil unrest. That's according to the Washington Post, citing internal Pentagon documents. The plan calls for 600 troops to be on standby at all times, ready to deploy within an hour. They'd be stationed in Alabama and Arizona. Cost projections put a price tag of hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on the mission. The U.S. D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals determined the legislative branch is the only department that can sue the White House for changes made to congressionally approved budgets. This decision allows the Trump administration to not spend funds allocated by Congress. It also lets President Trump continue to scale back foreign aid grants. The money in question includes $4 billion for global health programs and another $6 billion for HIV and AIDS programs. Drone wars are taking over the border. On the U.S. side, local law enforcement is now using AI programmed drones to locate drug traffickers and migrants. Meantime, on the Mexico side, cartels are using drones to find where to smuggle drugs in the U.S. Government has long used drones at the border, but local agencies getting involved is a different story. The National News Desk, Jeff Harris reports.
On the U.S. side, the goal is to keep drugs and migrants out. For Mexican cartels, they want to get the drugs in, both using high-tech drones to do so. But smaller law enforcement agencies are now joining in, taking the battle in the sky to new heights.
Both the U.S. and the Mexican cartels now ramping up their use of drones, but for competing agendas. One side, keep drugs and migrants out. The other, sneak drugs in.
They've been using drones now for a while, and they're using it to smuggle drugs every single day into this country.
Stephen Willoughby, director of DHS's counter-drone program, telling a U.S. Senate committee last month, cartel drones made over 27,000 flights within 500 meters of the southern border during the last 6 months of 2024. They're flying between the hours of 8 p.m. and 4 a.m., when the cover of darkness can obscure illicit activity. Those drones aren't commercial. National security expert Derek Maltz telling Fox News, cartels operate with the most sophisticated military-grade weapons.
They have, like, drone technology, dropping explosives
They could do that tomorrow on our Border Patrol.
In response, several smaller law enforcement agencies are now stepping into the arms race. Arizona's Cochise County, which shares 84 miles of its border with Mexico, launching AI-enhanced quadcopters, which have thermal imaging to help locate potential cartel traffic. The drone maker CEO telling Axios some drones can monitor anything from ground-penetrating radar to air quality and can measure a person's heart rate. New Mexico and Texas also launching drones, some of which can fly for hours, collect data using AI, and direct deputies to scenes using GPS. Now, the number of law enforcement agencies using drones has gone up significantly since 2018, jumping 150%, according to researchers at both Rutgers University and the Life Safety Alliance. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
The U.S. indicts Haiti's most notorious gang leader, Jimmy Barbecue Sherry Zia, and offers a $5 million reward for information that could lead to his arrest and conviction.
The FBI is focused more than ever on crushing violent crime, cartels, and gang activity every single day.
Barbecue is a former police officer known for starting a gang operated in Port-au-Prince. The United Nations accuses the gang of using violence to destabilize the government, attacking prisons, government buildings, and airports. Also included in the indictment is Basil Richardson, who's charged with sending money to Barbecue to fund his gang activities. U.S. deficits now climbing as President Trump ramps up tariffs, according to Treasury Department data. The deficit rose 20% this fiscal year compared to the last, despite a nearly 300% jump in revenue from import taxes. The Treasury Department cites growing interest payments on the public debt and cost of living increases to Social Security payouts. This as the national debt rises to $37 trillion. Higher electricity prices now showing no signs of falling. The Energy Information Administration is reporting the average utility bill for a U.S. customer last year was $144. That's up from $122 in 2021. And this week's inflation report shows electricity is up 5.5% over the last year, higher than the average inflation rate. This could be attributed to many factors like high inflation, the growing number of energy-consuming data centers, and the need for infrastructure upgrades. President Trump confirmed this week that he is considering reclassifying marijuana as a less dangerous drug. He told reporters that he hopes to make a decision within the coming weeks. Marijuana is currently classified as a Schedule I substance like heroin and ecstasy, which all means it has the highest potential for abuse, and it's subject to the strictest of restrictions. His administration is considering dropping it to a Schedule III drug, putting it alongside ketamine, steroids, and testosterone. President Trump and Russian President Putin's meeting in Alaska, marking the first time Putin has been on U.S. soil in 10 years. But Putin is just one of many controversial world leaders Trump has met with over the course of his first and now second terms. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And when it comes to Zelensky, obviously criticizing Putin, saying it's one big show. But when we look at President Trump, unlike previous presidents, he is meeting in person with these leaders.
Yeah, his interactions are almost always pretty unique compared to past leaders. Some past at least. Now it's really coming down to that personal face-to-face engagement. Like I said, some past presidents more so relied on intermediaries or formal channels, but really Trump almost every time meets face-to-face with these leaders who are oftentimes widely criticized and usually considered, our enemies, our adversaries. Take Kim Jong-un of North Korea, for example. Trump met with him 3 times. Trump also met with Chinese President Xi Jinping multiple times, actually. So it's that trend of just that face-to-face contact. He's not afraid to shake their hand and talk about things.
And on that point, tell us more about the major moves his team has made on a global scale.
Definitely. First one that comes to mind, I would say, is the Abraham Accords. When he brokered that deal in 2020, it really normalized relations between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain, which was a pretty major diplomatic achievement that we see the ripple effects now today.
And it is all unfolding rapidly. For more on this Fact Check team topic, including links to Emma's sources, just scan that QR code or visit thenationaldesk.com. Still to come here, our team of correspondents breaks down this week in Washington, from newly released documents in the Russiagate scandal to the new push to stop state governments from implementing DEI programs.
welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The Trump administration continuing to declassify Russiagate documents that Republicans say prove that Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, former President Obama, and his intelligence team smeared Trump by pushing the narrative that Russia meddled in the 2016 election to help get Trump elected. National correspondent Christine Frizzau, documents released this week allege Obama's director of national intelligence was directly involved in this effort.
Yeah, and we should say, Steve, this was just not the first round of emails and documents that were released, but this was interesting because it shows that then NSA Director Mike Rogers had some concerns about a lack of access to intelligence and also a lack of time to review. In other words, it was done very hastily. So he raised those concerns in an email that was released, and then we saw the response by then Director of National Intelligence James Clapper. Now, he said some interesting things. He first of all said, you know, it's essential that we be on the same page in the highest tradition of, quote, that's our story and we're sticking to it. He also said, you know, that it's important that this gets out in a timely manner. He says we may have to compromise our, quote, normal modalities. More time is not negotiable. Remember, this was after the 2016 election. It was important. This was something on a lot of Americans' minds, is Russia's role in the election. And they just wanted to come out with a sort of unified front on what they were finding. President Trump did respond to these emails late last week.
There was a whole scheme to try and demean Trump so that I couldn't win an election. And that is a criminal group of people. They're sick people, and they're criminals, and they should be taken care of.
So, you know, I should say that those involved in the intelligence community at the time deny any wrongdoing. What we are seeing is some interesting back and forth discussions going on between the intelligence community. What we're not seeing is any actual tangible evidence of anyone saying we've got to get Trump, we've got to target him. In other words, there's not total evidence that there were politics at play here.
Yeah, the president's saying the Democrats need to be taken care of. I don't know what that means, but we're definitely going to hear about it when Congress comes back after Labor Day. Meanwhile, a report released this past week concludes that national organizations with deep connections to state government bureaucrats continue to implement DEI programs, even in states where Republican leaders are trying to end those programs. The president of the State Leadership Initiative, the conservative group behind the report, calls those national organizations a, quote, shadow government. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, you spoke to Noah Wall, SLI's president. What else did he tell you?
We did, Steve. So SLI took a look at more than 20 of these national organizations that organize state level, or organizations that are at the state level nationally. So we're looking at like the National Association of the State Education Boards, things like that. So it's this national branch that oversees some of those state level policies. Now, SLI dug into what exactly these organizations were doing. And according to them, they found pushes for diversity, equity, and inclusion, environmental, social and governance standards, and gender-based policies, even in very red states like Texas. So what the founder told me was, because of this, the way that this is being organized, you're seeing states like Texas and states like California have very similar approaches to things like whether or not to use specific pronouns for transgender children in the public education system. And here is the founder when we spoke to him earlier this week.
What we're seeing is that this is not politically neutral. They label themselves as bipartisan, but effectively they are very partisan, and they are all left-leaning, uniformly pushing the same ideology in Republican and Democrat states alike. Texas having indistinguishable policies from, say, California or Indiana.
Steve, now we did talk to a representative from one of these organizations, and they went through the report and they claimed that everything in it about their specific organization was absolutely false. For example, the report says that they have a DEI committee. The representative I spoke to said they did have a DEI committee. It was a bipartisan DEI committee back in 2022. That committee has since been resolved. But even when the committee was in operation, Steve, he explained it was more of an ad hoc forum for people that were interested in things like discussing DEI within their organization to come together and share some of those thoughts and ideas. It wasn't mandatory. It didn't set any policies or anything like that. So there does seem to be a bit of a spectrum here as to how much power these and influence these organizations do have.
Kayla, Christine, great reporting as always. Thank you both for your hard work. Back to you.
Federal law enforcement and the National Guard are now on the streets of Washington, D.C. as the debate over President Trump's efforts to combat crime and homelessness in the nation's capital rages on. The National News Desk Emma Withrow reports.
President Trump announcing this year's Kennedy Center honorees Wednesday.
We're going to also fix up a place called Washington, D.C. We're going to make it so beautiful again.
But just outside the Kennedy Center earlier this week, homeless living in tents, a scene repeated throughout Washington, D.C., and something Trump once cleaned up as a part of his D.C. crime crackdown.
Homeless individuals will be given the option to leave their encampment, to be taken to a homeless shelter, to be offered addiction or mental health services, and if they refuse, they will be susceptible to fines or to jail time.
Federal law enforcement and more than 850 National Guard troops taking to D.C. streets. The Trump administration touting 24 arrests for a range of crimes, including murder, since the president announced his federal takeover on Monday.
The deterrence message is keeping people off the street from doing violent things so they know there's an uptick in law enforcement.
Democrats pushing back on the federal deployment.
What people want more than anything in those communities is they don't want performative, they want performance. They're looking for someone who actually understands how to make people feel safe and how to make people actually safe in their communities.
The Trump administration arguing that people aren't safe, despite statistics showing a drop in crime, a sentiment shared by D.C.-based ABC News anchor Kira Phillips.
It was within the last 2 years that I actually was jumped walking just 2 blocks down from here. And then just this morning, one of my coworkers said her car was stolen a block away from the Bureau.
D.C.'s mayor insisting that characterizations of D.C. as crime-ridden and dirty are exaggerated.
We don't live in a dirty city. We are not 700,000 scumbags and punks. We don't have neighborhoods that should be bulldozed.
Fighting crime is a good thing. We have to explain. We're going to fight crime. The place is going to hell, and we've got to stop it.
Reporting for the National News Desk, I'm Emma Withrow.
Another inmate slips away at a busy airport. How the prisoner escaped custody and how many times. That's now happened at SeaTac this year. Then a school bus crash near Austin, Texas, sends several children to the hospital. The school district speaks out as the investigation continues. This is the National News Desk, America's News Now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. But we start in Seattle, Washington, where another prisoner managed to escape from police custody at SeaTac Airport.
20-year-old John Nino back in custody less than 24 hours after he became a wanted man. He's not just the guy who escaped custody at SeaTac Airport. The prisoner transfer is the third escapee in 3 months at SeaTac. He gave DOC officers the slip Tuesday night at the airport's garage, fled across a sky bridge, and was last seen headed towards Highway 99. How did he get away?
Still looking into that at this point.
The DOC's Christopher Wright said Nino was cuffed at the time, but it appears one of his hands is free.
Thankfully, incidents like this are rare.
Wright says this is their first DOC escapee here in about a year. They handled 250 a year at SeaTac.
I think if you're a SeaTac passenger, you're looking at the last 3 months, and we've had 3 prison transfers where 3 prisoners escaped. So the question becomes, what do we do about it? And it doesn't feel that rare.
That's true. This is the first one involving DOC. The other 2, I believe, it was a private company and then an ICE individual earlier this year. But yeah, understandably, that would be a concern among passengers at the airport.
At the end of the day, this is something that will change. It's simply a question of when, and just deeply disappointing that the school board is overreaching and not recognizing that they're out of touch with West Virginia.
Governor Morrissey doubling down on his comments on the board and continuing to say that allowing for religious exemptions through executive order is an extension of a 2023 religious freedom law. He says overlaying the vaccine law and the religious freedom law allows for the exemptions. This matter has already had a day in court in Raleigh County as the judge ruled in favor of allowing for religious exemptions, but only for the 3 students who brought the suit. The next court hearing in Raleigh County is for a permanent injunction in September, but an appeal could cancel that hearing. The state board has not yet officially filed one.
You're violating a governor's order, a judge's ruling, and the Equal Protection for Religion Act passed by our legislature to prevent exactly this kind of discrimination.
It was a scary end to the first day of school for 42 students from Baghdad Elementary School and their veteran bus driver when the bus taking them home rolled over on Nameless Road in Travis County, ending up on its side.
Upon arriving on scene, our paramedics and firefighters and police officers identified 43 total patients from the collision. Of those, 12 needed transport.
They were taken to area hospitals, some by Starflight due to the distance between rural Leander and the hospitals.
We want each of those students and their families to know that our prayers are with them.
Leander ISD Superintendent Bruce Gearing told reporters the district will offer assistance to students and families affected by the crash. The Texas Department of Public Safety says the bus is a 2024 model and came equipped with seat belts. The bus had just left Baghdad Elementary when the crash happened, and the investigation to determine the cause is underway.
Still ahead, YouTube launches an initiative to make their platform safer for teens. The new AI tool designed to give parents peace of mind. Plus, planning your next vacation just got a whole lot simpler. The new payment option from Airbnb that might alleviate some of that stress of upfront costs. YouTube is starting to test a new safety feature for American teens. It's an AI estimation model that distinguishes age regardless of the birth date entered when creating the account. If it's determined a user is under 18, they will be notified and standard protections will automatically be enabled. These protections include digital well-being tools like reminders to take breaks or go to bed. Users will have the option to prove they are at least 18, such as with a government ID or credit card. Also, President Donald Trump visited the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. this week, unveiling the next recipients of its Hallmark honors. The president announcing the awards would be given to country singer and songwriter George Strait, actors Michael Crawford and Sylvester Stallone, singer Gloria Gaynor, and the rock band KISS. Trump also announcing he would personally host the institution's award show in December. Airbnb is introducing a new feature called Reserve Now, Pay Later. It's available to U.S. customers for eligible domestic stays. The full rental amount isn't due until shortly before the end of the listing's free cancellation period. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Just check your local listings, and you can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on thenationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, we hope you have a great week.